Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Maryland Apex Accelerator webinar today. I'm your host, Yasmin Razak, and I'm the Marketing and Training Coordinator here. Today's topic is simple access to SBA surety bonds, and it is led by Peter Gibbs, who is the President and CEO of Foundation Surety and Insurance Solutions. We will get started very shortly, and there will be opportunities for you to ask Peter your questions by typing them in the chat box on your screen. As always, this event is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel, and a copy of the slides will be sent to you later on today. For those of you not familiar with Maryland Apex Accelerator, it's our mission to help Maryland businesses compete in federal, state, and local government procurement processes. Our services are no cost to you, so please do register on our website if you need assistance. Okay, good morning, Peter. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Yasmin. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully today is going to allow you to understand the importance of surety bonding as it relates to your business. I'd like to start off by saying, if you're ever in a situation, and this happens to us a lot, companies, we get an email or a phone call from a company who spent a lot of time working on getting a project with whether it's the federal government, state, county. And I'm mainly focusing on construction companies, professional cleaning companies, any contract that requires a surety bond. So they spend a lot of time working on a project, and then they get awarded the contract, and then there's a bond requirement, and then they reach out to me. Sadly to say, if they're not prepared for that bond, most likely they're going to lose that contract. So today's topic, we're going to be telling you about surety bond and how you can prepare your company for projects, whether it's federal, state, private, county, whatever. As long as the contract requires a bond, surety bonding is extremely important. My assistant today is my wife, Nakia Gibbs. She'll be flipping our slides. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to tell you about what is a surety bond, why are bonds important, SBA Surety Bond Guarantee Program. I'm going to tell you about that program. I'm going to tell you how to obtain a surety bond. I'm also going to tell you about how an agent like me, how we underwrite an account, the benefits of working with someone who understands the SBA bonding program. And my gift to you guys is, top 10 tips that I have for contractors. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will, go over the questions at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. A little bit about me. I'm a retired. I worked for SBA for 32 years. In 2021, I retired from SBA and I started our company, Foundation Surety. The last 18 years of my 32 years at SBA, I ran the SBA Bond Guarantee Program. Fun facts about me, my wife and I are both veterans, but in 2023, I was inducted into the National ROTC Hall of Fame during the AUSA conference. And then the last thing is, I want you guys to pray for me because I have my lovely wife and I have 5 daughters, 2 sets of twins. So I have no say-so in my household. So please, I need your prayers on that. Next slide, please. These are some of the things that I accomplished at SBA, but the one thing I like to highlight is what's in red, where it says 4% default rate and 1% program loss rate. So what does that mean to me? It means that it's never, ever whether a small business can get the job done. The problem is getting the opportunity to get on the job. And from my experience, surety bonding and a lack of capital for your company is what stops you from taking advantage or even being awarded federal, state, county projects, right? So it's never ever about whether you can do the job or not, but being prepared, you know, to making sure that your back office prepared so that you can qualify for a bond if you get awarded a contract is more important. All right. Next slide, please. So what is a surety bond? Pretty simple. It's a three-party agreement between the surety company, who I represent, the owner of the project. The owner can be the federal government, it can be a private developer, it could be the general contractor. You as a sub to a GC, the GC becomes the owner / obligee. It could be from the county, come from the city. They're the owner. And then the third party is you, the principal or the owner of the small business. So it's a three-party agreement between the surety company, the owner of the project, and the owner of the small business. And the surety bond protects the owner by guaranteeing the performance of the project. Real simple, right? Next slide, please. Why are bonds needed? On the federal level, every project that's $150,000 requires a bond. It is the law. You can't get around it, right? And even though it's not a law at the state, the county, and the private level, most of those entities mirror the federal law. So, you know, there's a lot of confusion about bonding. Well, only if I'm going after federal projects, I need a bond. Only if I'm going after city or state or state projects, I need a bond. And what I would say to you today is, you know, if you're in the construction field, those areas that I mentioned earlier, you need to be a bondable company, whether it's on the private side or whether it's on the public side. If your goal is to grow your company, you need to be able to get bonds so that you can grow your business, okay? Next slide, please. So in 1970, SBA created the Surety Bond Guarantee Program. And it's a partnership between the federal government and Treasury listed surety companies to assist small businesses who are having obstacles, difficulties of getting bonds for when they're awarded projects, right? And it allows small business to gain access to bid bonds, payment, performance, and ancillary bonds. With the SBA bond guarantee, small businesses can qualify for surety bonding with reasonable terms, right? What does reasonable terms mean? It means that you probably are not going to pay some ridiculous rate to get a bond. It means that you don't have to give up collateral. It means that you most likely will not have to put up funds control to get a bond. So you're dealing with Treasury listed surety companies, and you're dealing with agents who have to follow rules and regulations to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of, right? Next slide, please. What's the benefit of utilizing the SBA Surety Bond Guarantee Program? So let me demonstrate to you. Like if you're a small business and you're trying to get a bond for $1 million, right? If you're a small business and you have $100,000 liquid cash in the bank, you meet all the experience, you have an experienced team, your back office is good, you don't have any issue with working capital, you should have no issues getting a bond. Most of the companies that we deal with, they don't have $100,000 liquid cash in the bank to get a bond, right? But because SBA is guaranteeing 80 to 90% of the bond that's backed by these surety companies, SBA says for that same $1 million bond, if you have $50,000 as opposed to $100,000, you would qualify for that same $1 million bond. It gets even better than that. If you, as a small business, have a business line of credit, the unused portion of that line of credit can count towards that $50,000. So needless to say, you can have a small business and without having $100,000, as long as you have a business line of credit, you would qualify for that same $1 million bond. So the working capital requirement is lowered, and then you get to utilize, the business line of credit. It allows you to be able to go after projects, larger projects on internal financial statements. For example, you can get a bond guaranteed by SBA up to $2 million if you have an internal financial statement. Of course, you have to meet all the other underwriting criteria, but if you meet those things, you can get that same. You would qualify for that bond without having to have 10% working capital. The limits in the SBA bond guarantee program is on $9 million for non-federal jobs, and if it's a federal jobs, you can go after projects up to $14 million if you qualify for it. Right? I know these numbers sound high. I can tell you that in our business, the average size bond that we do is between $2 and $3 million. So we don't really see too many small businesses going after $9 million. We see it from time to time, but it's rare. So if you're a small business, the important thing is to understand, like, what do you qualify for? One of the things that I'm going to stress on this presentation is that it's very important that you have a relationship with a bonding agent so that you know what your limits are, right? So if you're a small business, you need to sit down with an agent, and the agent will tell you, hey, based on your financial statements, based on your experience, you qualify for jobs at $500,000, right? So you know what projects size you should be going after. Too many small businesses spend a lot of time going after projects and not even knowing what they truly qualify for based on their experience and based on their financial statements. So it's important that you take the time to develop a relationship with a surety bond agent, right? Next slide, please. How do you benefit? It allows you to grow your business, increase opportunities, and flexible requirements. We talked about that with the working capital requirement that's in the standard market, and a working capital requirement if you're supported by the SBA bond guarantee program. As far as how are you evaluated, agents like myself, we look at the capacity, capital, and character. Capacity, we want to see your back office. We want to see what type jobs have you completed, what size jobs have you completed. Capital, we're looking at your balance sheet. We're looking at your P&L. We're looking at it to see if you have a line of credit. We're going to dig into that. And of course, character, we want to do business with people of good character who are paying their bills, paying their subs, paying their people. That's what we want to do business with. Next slide, please. As far as qualifications for the SBA bond guarantee program, is pretty similar to the loan program. You must be current on taxes, and if you have a repayment agreement with the IRS, you're paying that on time, and there are no issues with that. You have to pass the underwriting standards. We're going to get into the underwriting standards in a little more detail, in a few minutes. Of course, you have to be someone of good character. There must be a requirement for a bond. You must be a U.S.-based business for profit with legal resident owners. Just recently, SBA has been requiring small businesses you know, if you weren't born in this country, you have to provide a legal resident. You know, just have to verify that you are eligible to receive, you know, assistance or from the federal government. You must be eligible to do business with the federal government. You cannot be involved in a current bankruptcy proceeding, but if that bankruptcy was discharged, you know, you qualify. As far as criminal history, as long as the principal or the owner of the business is not currently incarcerated or under indictment for a felony, you qualify for the program, right? And of course, you must be categorized as a small business based on the NAICS code. I will tell you that if you're a general contractor, a GC, and the average revenue is about 42.5 million, you qualify as a small business. Average revenue for the past 3 years, right? You qualify whether it's construction, service, or supply firms. If it's a manufacturing company, it's the average number of employees. The important thing here is for you as a small business, you need to go, you know, do a search for NAICS code, put what type of business you're in, and you'll figure out what, you know, what does it take for you to be considered a small business, right? It's pretty simple. Next slide, please. Yes, this slide, you know, I put this up here to purposely confuse people. Not really confused, but the point here is to encourage small businesses, you know, who require bonding to sit down with an agent so that they understand, number one, what they qualify for, but they need to understand that if they wait till the last minute to get a bond, because of this process, they will most likely not get a bond and ultimately lose a project, right? Because in many cases, after you're awarded a contract, the contracting officer will tell you, hey, you got 3 days, 5 days, 7 days to get that bond. And if you can't get it within that time limit, you're going to lose the contract because there's a lot involved in getting a bond. I'll give you an example. Let's say you get a contract for $3 million, right? So that means you have to have a compilation financial statement. There's no way that you can get a compilation done in a week, right? So it's important that you understand that you should sit down with an agent and find out what you qualify for and make sure that you're prepared in case you get awarded a contract, right? One of the things I want to stress on this slide is from this point on, whenever you complete a project, you should get a reference letter, right? A reference letter is extremely important in the bonding process because it gives assurance to the surety agent like myself that you've completed some projects and people have, you know, and you have documentation to show that you actually completed projects, right? Yasmin, are there any questions that we can address at this time before I keep going?
Yes, there is one question, Peter. And to anybody who joined us since we started, you can type out your questions in the chat. We have a question from Justin, and he asks, where can we find the underwriting requirement?
Okay, I'm going to get to that. That's part of the presentation. I'm going to get there, Justin. All right. Next slide, please. Here it is. This is this is the list for our company, Foundation Surety, but any agent that you sit down with is going to be a similar list, right? The first thing, probably the most important thing, is like the contractors questionnaire, where it's probably the longest form that you have to fill out, 6 or 7 pages. We want to know everything about your company. When was it formed? Who are the owners? What kind of relationships you have? Everything about your company, right? Then we want to look at financial statements. Financial statements for the past 3 years. For newer companies, you know, I'll take a look at tax returns. But I'll be honest with you, if a company comes to me for bonding and they've been around for 10+ years and they don't have financial statements, I'm probably not the agent for you, right? Because if you've been in business for 10 years, you should be getting some form of you should be getting financial statements for your company. I want to see a work in progress schedule. I want to know what projects you're working on, what percentage is complete, what kind of profit margins you're making on that project. I want to see, I start off with business bank statements, probably the most current month. We also want to see personal financial statements. Depending on what's on the personal financial statements, I may ask to see your personal bank statements just to verify cash. I want to see resumes of owners and key personnel. If you're looking for a specific project, I want to see the job cost breakdown. I want to see how many subs you're going to have on the project. I want to see what kind of profit margin you're making. We talked about reference letters. If you're a new company and this is a real good advantage, utilizing the SBA bond guarantee program. If you're a new company, let's say 2 guys were working at a larger construction company and they decided to start their own project, then I would want to see a list of completed projects so we can figure out what's a good starting point for your new business. And of course, we want to see a business line of credit with current balance, right? I saw 2 questions pop up, now 3.
Yes, would you like to do them now?
Yes.
Okay, as a subcontractor for a VA project, who do I get the reference letter from? The government team or the company that's subcontracted to my company? And also second part of that was, what if I only have a tax return for only 2 years?
So to the first question, I would say get it from both. Try to get it from the government and try to get it from, if you're a sub to a GC, get it from both, right? In that situation, it's probably easier to get it from the sub, but if you can get it from the federal government, get it, right? Again, like I said, if you're a business and you've been around, less than 5 years, I will look at tax returns. But if you're a business and you've been around for more than 5 years, I would expect you to have financial statements, right? But again, I would also say that, once we sit down and I look at the documents that you give me, then I'll make a decision whether I want to work with you or not, right? But the important thing is, just have a conversation with the agent and, provide what you have and see if they can help you, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Question number 2.
Yes, can you provide what would be the difference in type of surety bond requirements for prime and subs for both federal and non-federal projects?
I mean, there's no difference, there's basically a bond is, if you're a sub, well, if you need a bond in the private sector or for the federal sector, I mean, there is no difference. You just have to provide a bond for whatever the contract amount is. So there is no difference.
Okay, that's all the questions for now.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah, so from my experience, prior to working for SBA, like I said, I did 32 years at SBA, but right out of college, I worked for an 8A firm in Dayton, Ohio, a company called Wise Construction Company. And then I also worked for a larger GC in New York City called Nyco Construction. So I had a lot of experience with that. And with all my years at SBA, we've come up with some, and of course with our new company, reasons why small businesses get denied for bonding, right? I would say the number 1 reason is inadequate financials, right? So I would tell you, number 1, if you're doing QuickBooks, make sure that you have someone, whether it's internal or external, who understands how to input stuff into your financial statement, into QuickBooks, right? Because if you put it in, if you put bad stuff in or put it in the wrong way, it's not going to look right coming out, right? So make sure that whoever is doing your QuickBooks understand it, right? The other rule of thumb I would tell you is if you're in the construction business, make sure that you get an accountant or CPA who understands construction accounting, right? Insufficient working capital. We kind of talked about that earlier. The rule of thumb is, when you're getting bonded in the non-SBA world, you got to have 10% working capital. And in the SBA world, you need about 5% working capital, right? Keep money in your company. Make sure that you're not doing things that doesn't make sense. One of the biggest things that I see in small businesses is, getting bad advice from people who don't understand how decisions impact you as far as a construction company, right? For example, having large distributions on an annual basis, it's gonna deplete your balance sheet. You want to sit down and talk with your agent, well, how does this impact my financial statement if I do this, right? Again, we talked about the large profit withdrawals. You start making money, you start doing things with your money that you shouldn't do, right? Another thing is the jump in job size. If the largest job you've ever done was $100,000, then it's going to be very difficult for you to get a bond for $1 million project. The rule of thumb in the surety business is if whatever your largest project was, will go 2 to 3 times your largest project completed. So if your largest project was $100,000, the max that you should really be going after is about $300,000, right? And it's not about where you start; it's about where you finish, right? Because after you do that $300,000, then you can go after $600,000. You do a $600,000, then you can do a $900,000, right? So grow responsibly, right? The job that you're going after is not supported by your balance sheet, right? One of the biggest but simple things, is when you're getting a bond, there's a thing called a general indemnity agreement, GIA, that has to be signed by you and your wife or your spouse, right? Whether your spouse is involved in your business or not, right? And too many times we've had to decline business because the spouse refuses to sign the GIA, right? This is something that you can't get around, okay? If you had a claim, some small businesses think that if I was with Surety A and I had a claim, then I can just go to Surety B and get a project. It's very simple for us to find out if you were involved in a claim. But it's also very important for you to, be upfront with your situation with the agent so the agent can know what they're dealing with to see if they can truly help you. It doesn't mean that if you have a claim, you're going to be automatically declined, but it's something that you need to, be very open about with your agent. Weak internal controls, the worst thing that I can, I'm trying to give you an example, but if, your back office as a small business should be in order. For example, if you need updated documentation, you should be able to get that to your agent, pretty quickly. If it starts taking a long time, then, and especially if you want to do larger projects, it becomes a problem with the agent. If you have legal or tax issues, again, this is one of those things where, you need to be open about what's going on so that we can, make an informed decision. It doesn't mean that you're going to get denied, but we have to weigh and find out all the facts so that we can figure out, do we want to support you as a small business, right? If you have high debt, negative cash flow, you know, one of the things that we see is companies just going out and buying a bunch of equipment, but they don't have the work to support the equipment that they buy. So now you've just added all this debt to your balance sheet, and then you're not, you know, you buying all this equipment is not really causing you to get additional work or revenue. So, you know, these decisions, you know, you really should have a discussion with your agent, with your accountant. You know, how is this going to impact my business as a whole, right? So these are some of the reasons why we deny projects. Next slide, please. Of course, there are fees associated with bonding. If you're getting a bid bond, there's no cost. You don't have to pay any cost. I do know that some agents might charge you an application fee. As far as our company, we do not charge for a bid bond. You know, when you're bidding on a project, there's a two ways to do it, right? You can provide a bid bond, which shouldn't be cost, or the entity may require you to have a cashier's check that's 5% of your bid, right? Hopefully it makes sense to you that you should have a relationship with an agent and just get a bid bond as opposed to putting up, you know, money to get a bond, right? Now, if you get awarded the contract, there's a contractor fee that we charge is 0.6% of the contract amount. That fee goes to SBA. And then the premium is what comes to me as the agent, and that's usually around 2.5%. So the cost to you as a small business is about 3.1%, right? But I just want to make this very clear to you guys. When you're bidding a project, once you've estimated the project, you want to add 3.1%, and that becomes your new bid amount, right? If you get awarded the contract, you include the cost of the bond in your first pay application to the owner. The point is, whatever the cost of the bond is going to be reimbursed to you as a small business, right? Because a lot of small businesses, they're like, Mr. Gibbs, you know, bonding is so expensive. I said, it's not that expensive, number one, but it's a cost that you can pass on to the owner of the project, right? Next slide. So this is my gift to you guys. These are tips that I've learned in my almost 40 years of working with small businesses, especially construction, professional cleaning companies. Someone asked, the bond fee only applies when you win the bid, right? Yes. So there's no cost for a bid bond, but you should include it in your bid, right? But you don't pay for the bid bond. But if you get awarded the contract, you have to pay for the final bond, the payment and performance bond, right? So my tip to you guys is, number one, hire an accountant as your first full-time employee, right? Again, this goes back to your foundation. If you have a company, your back office is great, most likely you're going to be in business for a long time. Maintain a strong banking relationship. Focus and excel in one trade. Too many times I go to events and people walk up to me and they say, Mr. Gibbs, I said, what do you do? I can do everything. You know, understand that bonding is a risk. And when you say I can do everything, you know, you've just become a riskier business to me, right? So focus and excel in one trade. The thing that we preach to our 700 clients nationwide is we want them to start small and grow gradually. So we're going to meet you where you are, but we want you to grow gradually, right? Develop a solid surety relationship with an agent. I've been stressing that to you guys. A surety relationship is critical to your success and your growth as a small business. So make sure that you have a solid relationship. Don't wait until you get a bond to reach out to an agent. Establish a relationship now. Avoid venturing into unfamiliar areas when you start making a profit. When you start making a profit, don't go open a nightclub. Don't go buy a plane. Make sure that you're keeping the money in your company, right? Don't go open a clothing line. Everything I'm telling you is, I'm not making it up, right? I'm going to tell you what you've probably heard different wherever you go. Whenever you go to events, people will always say, whether it's political, whether it's people working for the government or whatever, they always tell you, look around the room, meet someone, network with someone. You never know. You guys can partner and joint venture. I am not a fan of joint ventures or teaming. I strongly believe that you should be growing responsibly on your own, right? From my experience at SBA, I saw the end of those types of relationships, and many of them were not successful. So again, you can grow responsibly on your own, right? And I don't want to dig too deep into this, but I do want to give you an example. Regardless of what they tell you on YouTube and, these conferences, the average profit, I'm talking about net profit on a construction project is like 14%. So if I joint venture with you, now we're talking about 7.7. You can't have a successful business making 7%, right? I had a gentleman walk into my office last week, and he's making like 2% profit, and his company is not growing like he expected to go, right? And that's all he's been doing is like joint ventures and teaming. Like I said, I say to you, you can become a successful company and grow your company on your own. And you don't need to get into these joint venture and teaming arrangements, right? Understand your competition and contract job cycles. Know what jobs are coming up. Know who your competitors are, right? It's just like in sports. I'm not gonna just play people without knowing, what their weaknesses are, their strengths are, how good they are. This is the same in business. Know your competition and know what's coming up with the county, with the state, with the federal government, right? Because many of these things are cyclical construction. Every 5 years, they put out a contract. Every 3 years, every 2 years. Know everything about your business. Learn about how the 8A, being an 8A, being 8A certified. Know what that means. Know what it takes to get projects. Know what system. How do I get into SAMs? How do I know everything about the 8A process before you go after 8A certification? And the last thing is diversified with both private and government contracts. And that goes back to the old adage, do not put all your eggs in one basket, right? Diversify your portfolio. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the last slide of the presentation, but it's probably my favorite slide. As a small business, my wife and I, we own a small business, and trust me, as soon as we get in our office in the morning, there's like 1,000 emails from people who want to help us, who want to help us increase revenue, who want to give us money. The stuff can be overwhelming as a small business. And what I would say to you is, there are things that you could do that will have more of an impact on your success as a small business. And it shouldn't cost you anything, right? Number one, simple things. when you submit an application, whether it's to a bank, whether it's to a surety company, take the time and answer every question. Make sure it's complete and accurate, right? You know, most of relationships for small businesses now is online, or, you know, you don't really get to sit down and meet people. And your first impression is an application that you send to them, right? And if it's not complete and if it's not accurate, you know, it may not be the start of a good relationship, right? Consult with your agent instead of guessing. If you're filling out the application and you don't really know what they're asking for, just send an email, reach out to the agent. Hey, what do you mean by this question, right? So don't, you know, because once you put information out there, it's very, very hard to take it back, right? Communicate promptly with your agent. If your agent, you know, ask you a question, make sure you respond timely. Don't wait a week or 2 weeks to respond. Again, you're building a relationship, and everything that you do could determine whether you get approved or denied for a bond. We talked about this earlier. Work with a construction accountant, right? Because they understand like what a surety company is looking for. One of the biggest things that we see, businesses send us their financials under a cash basis, right? Your financials should be done on an accrual basis, right? A construction accountant would know that. Build a strong relationship with your agent, right? Myself, when I'm having new relationships with clients, we always have a face-to-face or a Zoom call or Teams call so that I can get a chance to get to know them. I want to know what their goals are, what their objectives are, and I want to make a determination. Do I want to support this company, right? So it's very, very important that we understand the company and what they're trying to do. Again, this goes, the next bullet talks about, you know, having a relationship with an agent and you understanding what your limits are, right? So know what size projects you should be going after. Set up a bonding program, right? So that, you know, hey, once you sit down with the agent can tell you, hey, Mr. Gibbs, your Gibbs Construction, your single limit is $1 million, your aggregate is $2 million, right? So you know that, hey, I'm going after projects that I know my agent is going to complete. That's called a bonding program, right? Or a bonding line. Because at the end of the day, your relationship with an agent, it allows your agent to advocate for you, right? Because your agent is the one who's communicating with the surety company. And the better they know you, the better they know how you do things, you put them in a better position to advocate for you as a small business, right? And the last comment that I have here is keep your financials up to date, right? Right now we're in September, believe it or not, there are still companies who come to us for bonding and they still do not have their 12/31/2024 financials completed yet, right? You know, a rule of thumb is after the year, if your company year end is December 31st, by March of the following year, you should have a draft financial statement. If it's September and you don't have your financials, you know, it's going to be very difficult for an agent to really make an informed decision about whether they can help you or support what you're trying to get done. And I believe this is the last slide. Took us about 44 minutes. I know we answered most of the questions, but are there any additional questions? And the one thing that I would say to everyone that's on this call is, if you leave here without getting all your questions asked or answered, that's on you, right? We're here to try to answer any questions, good, bad, or indifferent, all right? Sorry, Yasmin.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for such an informative presentation. So yes, as Peter said, here's your chance to ask your questions, or if there's anything you'd like him to go over again, perhaps you missed earlier. All right, so we have a question from Alexander. Apart from financial statements, are there any other financial documentation? Is there any other financial documentation needed?
Yeah, I would say, and I would bucket that in under financial. I would say the work in progress schedule, which shows us what projects you're working on, what the contract amount is, what percentage you've completed, what kind of profits you're making, and also the most current bank statements. I would say those are probably all the financial information that we need.
Okay, thank you. Can you help us? Oh, your contact info, it's on the slides, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so I will be sending out the slides shortly, along with the recording. So you will have all that information to hand, and you can share the recording with your work colleagues.
Yep.
Okay, seems like they're all the questions we have for today. So I'd like to thank Peter so much for presenting, and also for Nakia in the background for controlling the slides. And we hope to have you guys back again soon. I know right now, a lot of people are worried about what's happening with the shutdown and the administration. So we appreciate you showing up here to continue your education. So yeah, I will be sending out the information shortly. So thanks again, Peter. Thanks, everybody. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, take care.